Do you know who is actually the most dangerous person? It's someone who has been living a lie for years and then learns the harsh truth. I never once suspected that my wife would betray me. Did I really not notice her deception? It's hard to see the truth when everyone around you is conspiring against you, hiding a terrible secret. Finally, I enjoy the peace and quiet when the house is completely at my disposal. A game is playing on the huge screen, 2 cold drinks have already been drunk, and even more are ready to be consumed in the mini refrigerator next to my comfortable chair. And now someone is on the phone. I really hope it's not some annoying salesman or robot. If that's the case, they're going to get a slap in the ear from me. It was Wednesday evening, about 8 o'clock. Tracy, my wife, usually worked late on Wednesdays, so I was always looking forward to an evening of relaxation or entertainment. Tonight was perfect for staying at home. Earlier in the day, I ate a delicious medium meat pizza from Papa John's and drank a couple of bottles of beer. Then, I settled back to watch the Cubs game while sipping a few more Coronas. 2 chilled bottles of beer were by my side, and 6 more were in the fridge. The night was just fantastic. Tracy usually arrived around 10 o'clock, took a quick shower, and by 11 o'clock, we were comfortably settled together. Wednesday nights were always relaxing. I knew that my peace would be interrupted by a phone call, despite my doubts. I picked up the phone, feeling the burden of responsibility. It was Shelley Train, the wife of Jacques, Tracy's boss. She called in a serious condition to inform me that Jacques had a heart attack while working with Tracy. She had called emergency services, and he was in critical condition. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, and Tracy rode with him in the ambulance. I promised Shelley I'd give her a ride later, as she planned to stay with Jacques until he recovered. I wished Jacques a speedy recovery and assured Shelley that I would be heading home soon. Tracy had worked under Jacques for 22 years, starting at his software development company right after graduating from college. She rose through the ranks and became his confidant and irreplaceable employee, often called his right hand. When Tracy started working at Jacques' company, I already knew her, and over the years, our families got to know each other better. Tracy always praised Jacques, saying he was a great boss who ensured she received fair compensation. Jacques, a Frenchman 10 years older than Tracy and me, is now 55 years old. He keeps himself in good shape by exercising regularly and has charisma, often the center of attention at social events, charming both men and women. Jacques was always in control of the situation. Despite our belief in a higher purpose for everyone, regardless of appearance, I was shocked by Jacques' unexpected heart attack. Parking in the hospital lot next to the emergency department, I hurried to the reception desk to ask about Jacques, introducing myself as Tracy's husband and expressing concern about her whereabouts. While I was talking to the nurse, a couple of medics nearby caught my attention. One of them muttered something about a scoundrel, which confused me. But my main task was to find Tracy. A minute later, Tracy and Shelley came out of the room looking upset. We hugged with tears in our eyes. Tracy broke the heartbreaking news about Jacques' sudden death from a massive heart attack. I was stunned into silence as we stood in the hallway, hugging tightly, overcome with emotions and tears. Shelley, a French citizen, had been married to Jacques for 35 years. They got married at a young age and moved to another country when Jacques got a job at an American software company at the beginning of the computer era. They have a daughter named Amy, who is 3 years older than my daughter, Allison, who was 18. The similarity between the girls is so striking that they can easily be mistaken for sisters. Jacques had a special bond with Amy, and I couldn't help but feel that this situation would be especially difficult for her. One of the medics came up to me and asked if I was Tracy's husband. After confirming this, he handed me Tracy's purse, which she had left in the ambulance. I moved away from the emotional women, took Tracy's purse in my left hand, thanked the ambulance doctor, and shook his hand with my right. When I started to put away the purse, I was surprised to find a bra inside. In the confusion of the women's tears, I hadn't noticed that Tracy wasn't wearing a bra. It seemed strange to me and made me ponder the current situation. Not knowing how long we would be at the hospital with Shelley, we finally decided it was time to leave, as Amy was due to arrive from the university in the morning. "Shelley, you need to make sure to get some good rest and sleep. I'll take you to our house tomorrow. We'll help you retrieve the car from the emergency room parking lot and Tracy's car from her workplace," I told Shelley. When we got home, Tracy didn't say a word to me. She immediately went to the main bathroom and took a shower. 20 minutes later, she was sitting with me in the living room, her eyes swollen and red from crying. As she sat down on the sofa with a worried look, I left the comfortable chair and walked over to her, hugging her tightly. Her breathing was uneven, and I could feel her body shaking with tears. I wanted to ask her about the incident with Jacques and why she wasn't wearing a bra, but I couldn't find the words to bring it up that evening. So, I just held her quietly for another 20 minutes until she said she was tired and went to bed. It was after midnight, and I also decided to call it a night and go to bed. The next day, I decided to take a day off from work. When I got ready, I offered to take Tracy to her office so she could pick up her car. However, she looked upset and couldn't speak clearly at first. After a while, she came to her senses and asked if I could take her to Shelley's. They needed to arrange for a taxi to take them to Jacques' office to collect some of his belongings. According to Tracy's plan, she and Shelley had to visit the hospital to sort out paperwork and pick up Jacques' personal belongings. Despite my offer to help, she politely declined. This turned out to be a blessing for me, as I needed to find the emergency doctors who were at the hospital the previous night and get some information from them. After leaving Tracy at Shelley's house and receiving a brief update on Shelley's health, I immediately went to the hospital. I quickly learned the names of the paramedics who responded to the call, and they told me how to find them. I found them at the rescue station as instructed. They remembered me from the previous night. I figured out the person who gave me Tracy's purse, named Gage, judging by his badge, I said, asking him how the emergency started. He hesitated. "What do you mean?" he asked suspiciously, looking at me. "My wife and Jacques were supposed to be picked up from the hotel, but you didn't do that, did you?" I asked. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound guilty," he replied, his voice becoming sharper. "In the past, we've encountered cases where people checked into a room under false pretenses, and when problems arose, all the blame fell on us. Please, don't be angry with us. Relax, Gage. I'm not accusing you. I'm just trying to get to the truth. It will become a problem if you don't truthfully tell me what happened," I said. "We went to the West Side Hotel," Gage responded quickly. When the man suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness, no more than 15 minutes had passed. The woman called emergency services, and while we were en route, she administered CPR to save his life. By the time we arrived at the emergency room, the man could barely stand on his feet, said a paramedic from the rescue service. I thanked both of them and left, feeling their sympathetic gazes on me. Tracy was in a secret relationship with Jacques, who died of a heart attack. How long had this deception lasted? A sudden realization hit me like a lightning bolt. The uncanny resemblance between Allison and Amy was not accidental, they were sisters. Tracy had maintained this connection for almost 2 decades. How could I have been so blind to this all this time? I berated myself for foolishly believing that Tracy and Jacques were working late. They often spent evenings with friends and went on business trips together, creating all the conditions for their affair. How could Shelley not have noticed all this? Despite being sometimes clueless, it seemed unlikely that she wouldn't have noticed, especially considering how much our daughters looked alike. Shelley was a frequent visitor to Jacques' workplace and apparently was friends with Tracy. How could Tracy betray her in such a way? When I got home, Tracy's car was parked in the garage. I found her in the living room, casually sipping wine. My disappointment must have been clear as day. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked innocently. Despite my attempts to remain calm, anger boiled up inside me. "How long have you been having an affair with Jacques?" I demanded, bitterness in my voice. "He's Allison's father, isn't he?" Tracy's glass shattered, and she jumped up from the couch in a rage. "How dare you make such filthy accusations?" she shouted furiously, her gaze deadly. If looks could harm, hers would be lethal. I stood my ground, unshakable in my convictions, resolutely meeting her gaze. Despite speaking in a low tone, my words were harsh. "You can tell me whatever you want, but don't try to deceive me. If you do, you'll regret it." In her 20 years of marriage, and even before that, I had never threatened my wife. Shock showed on her face. She was speechless, her mouth open as if she wanted to say something, but my stern expression silenced her. Instinctively, she took a step back, as if sensing the tension in my eyes. "You know what you did," I said, watching her slowly return to the couch, seemingly oblivious to the wine stain on the carpet. "Your affair, combined with his love for physical exercises, probably played a role in his death. To be honest, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, considering how deeply connected you were." It was clear from her worried expression that I had touched a nerve. She looked down at her hands nervously, fidgeting with them. Though it seemed like an eternity, in reality, it was only a brief moment. "I often wonder if Shelley shares the same thoughts as me," I whispered to Tracy. "What could make you think that?" Tracy whispered back. "If only she knew about your relationship," I said bluntly. "She knew about them," Tracy whispered, thinking. "Shelley not only knew about our relationship but supported it from the very beginning. Moreover, sometimes she even joined us, especially during business trips. She believed that I should find happiness with Jacques, given his significant role in the success of our business. She was glad that I was taking care of Jacques at the office while she was at home." I sank into a chair, feeling disoriented and confused. "So, I'm the only one who didn't know the truth. What about Allison?" I asked in disbelief. "Allison has known about this for 4 years. She's resigned to it," Tracy replied. "Oh no, Allison knows, and she's fine with it," I exclaimed. "Oh my God," I continued sarcastically, "but it wasn't in my plans. I didn't want it." "It's an accident," Tracy spoke up. "Does Shelley know that Allison is Jacques' child?" I asked. "Shelley knows, and she's fine with it." "Amy knows too," Tracy said. "Well, I hope you all found entertainment at my expense, in my ignorance," I said bitterly, with a bitter smile. "My daughter, whom I thought was mine but who turned out to be his daughter, hid it from me." "How wonderful," I said sarcastically. In a rage, I left the house and drove to the nearest park, where I sat alone for several hours. Tracy tried to call me, but I ignored her calls and sent them to voicemail. Sitting there, I felt stupid for not realizing that Tracy could cheat on me. Despite thinking I was smart, I was clearly blind to the truth. I had blindly trusted her for over 19 years, completely unaware of the reality. I couldn't help but think that other people, besides Jacques, were involved in this affair. As the sky began to darken, I had many questions in my head. I decided to leave the park and go home. When I entered the house through the garage, I noticed a dim light on in the kitchen above the table. Tracy was sitting in her usual place, sipping tea. She invited me to join her and offered me a cup too. I declined her offer and instead reached for a stronger drink from my liquor cabinet. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and settled into the chair opposite her. Tracy spoke softly, staring intently at her hands, expressing deep remorse for hurting me. "I can't even put into words how sorry I am," she said. "I need to know everything. Tell me the truth," I demanded with disappointment in my voice. "Explain to me how you could betray me by confessing your love. Tell me if you really loved me and respected me," I insisted. "Don't you dare doubt my love for you, ever. I've always loved you, and I love you now. It's just that I also love Jacques. Some people think you can only love one person, but I know that's not true because I love you too," she interrupted, her voice devoid of emotion. "Keep this nonsense to yourself." "I don't believe a word you say," I said firmly. Tracy joined the company a year after its opening. Like most representatives of small businesses, Soft's small team had to juggle many responsibilities, work long hours, and establish strong emotional bonds. This period was exciting for Tracy, and during our dates, she often talked about the difficulties she faced. Our relationship began a year before she joined the company. As Soft continued to expand and prosper, Tracy became Jacques' important partner in business management. While Jacques was the public face of the company, Tracy was a behind-the-scenes force ensuring smooth operation. Tracy was the linchpin that made everything run smoothly. She managed many tasks simultaneously, and Jacques increasingly relied on her as his right hand. Surprisingly, as Tracy and I became closer friends outside of work, her bond with Jacques strengthened. In the office, Tracy noticed that her personal and professional life were developing in sync. Although she and Jacques tried to maintain a professional demeanor in front of colleagues, their romance turned into a whirlwind of passion and desire that took Tracy's breath away and left her wanting more. Jacques, in turn, was surprised by the depth of feelings he felt for Tracy and realized that she quickly became more than just a casual affair for him. As they continued to explore their connection, they fell more and more in love with each other. Their conversations became more meaningful, and their bond grew stronger every day. Tracy and Jacques knew that their love was something special worth fighting for, and they were ready to do everything to make their relationship thrive. She had admitted that she never felt guilty for having intimate relations with Jacques and me. Even after I married her a year later, it was not just a physical desire but a deep, loving connection that she felt with both of us, similar and at the same time different from the one she had with me. But Tracy hid this aspect of her life from me because she knew about my firm stance against infidelity. She treasured both relationships very much and couldn't imagine letting either of us go. Although I didn't know about the affair, Shelley found out about it from Jacques about 2 months later. Realizing that the affair would not end, Jacques decided to confess to his wife, who had just given birth to their first child. According to Tracy, Jacques informed Shelley that she and their daughter would always come first for him, but he also expressed his love and affection for Tracy. After that, Shelley invited Tracy to join her and Jacques for the weekend. I remember Tracy making excuses about her mother's illness and going away for the weekend. After the trip, Shelley gave her blessing to the relationship. Years later, when Tracy found out that she was pregnant, it was Shelley who supported her in her worries and helped her decide what to do if the child was Jacques. Establishing paternity turned out to be a simple process. Additionally, since I did not often communicate with both girls one-on-one, any comments about their resemblance to Shelley or Tracy were easily dismissed with a joking comment about my social activities, which allowed me to avoid any doubts. Tracy mentioned that Shelley sees her as almost a younger sister and is proud to call Jacques a part of their family. I sat in shock while Tracy shared her stories. Tracy paused, waiting for my reaction. I couldn't help but ask if she and Jacques took a break when we first got married or if they made love all the time. She looked awkward, avoiding my gaze, but then admitted that they didn't. She recalled that period in her life was exciting. She had 2 handsome men who loved and wanted her. She described in detail their rendezvous, prioritizing cleanliness but also acknowledging the possibility of intimate moments together. She mentioned that she tried to avoid any intersections but admitted that she never had an intimate relationship with me after she was with Jacques. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said. "It's interesting that I've never compared our intimate relationship. After all this, you were both exceptional partners, showed care and attention, and had similar physical connections. Intimacy with Jacques was not a comparison of who was better or worse in bed but rather a unique experience shaped by our individual characteristics," Tracy said. I found some solace in the realization that my relationship with Tracy was not solely based on physical desire. And yet, it hurt me to find out that you had feelings not only for me but also for him. I have always believed in the ideals of monogamy, and this discovery left me deeply wounded, I confessed. The concept of one single partner for each person was questioned because Tracy, despite being the main recipient of my primary intimacy, also shared a connection with someone else. Tracy put down her tea and looked at me as if trying to peer into my soul. I thought about her silent question, but I was confused and could not find wise words. After putting down my drink and going to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty in the air. I couldn't understand why she did that, and I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. About 5 minutes later, Tracy climbed into bed next to me and snuggled up against my back. I pretended to be asleep, avoiding conversations, and even a simple good night. The next morning, I got up at my usual 5 a.m., completed all my usual morning rituals, and went to work. When I left, Tracy was still asleep and did not indicate that she was going to go to soft shell. I worked in pharmaceutical sales, and my success in this field was due to my ability to adapt to changing circumstances and an unwavering desire for success. Sitting at my desk and looking through the sales reports for the month, I realized that I needed to focus on work and not be distracted by personal problems. Jacques' departure could have caused a temporary hiccup, but I was confident that I would cope with any difficulties that stood in my way. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went back to work. I knew the production processes and functions of our products well, which distinguished me from other sales managers. I was not only involved in the development of one of our best sellers, Cod Crystal, a pill aimed at reducing libido for people with increased desire, but also directly enjoyed its success. It turned out to be a profitable venture for our company, and I received a decent reward for my contribution. Together with Tracy's income, we led a comfortable lifestyle. We had a beautiful house in a trendy neighborhood, 2 luxury cars, and amazing vacations. Even after the divorce, we'll both be fine financially. Here it is, the word I've been avoiding, divorce. It hadn't occurred to me until now, but after Tracy's betrayal, it seemed like the only way out. Now that my daughter has gone to college and no longer lives at home, we have no reason to continue the relationship. Despite the pain of Tracy breaking my heart, this should not cause serious concern. I've been working with my boss, Arnold Kramer, for 18 years now. After working as a chemist for another pharmaceutical company for 5 years, I met Ari at an industry convention, and we discussed various topics. It was then that he advised me to think about a career in sales. When I was offered a position in his company, I was intrigued by the challenge and decided to take a step forward. Ari appreciated my skills, and we both benefited enormously from our working relationship. Not only did we succeed together, but I also saw Ari as a truly kind person, and we formed a friendship that I think will last a lifetime. Ari has been happily married to his wife, Lauren, for about 30 years. At the age of 52, he has 2 adult children and 5 grandchildren. Despite his age, he radiates the vital energy of a much younger man. Having a sharp mind, he readily attracts other bright minds to work, including me. When I told Ari about Tracy's betrayal and my decision to end the marriage, he showed genuine concern. He asked if I was sure of her infidelity, to which I replied that I was sure. He realized that I needed space to think and collect my thoughts. Nevertheless, he gave me the contact details of a lawyer who could represent my interests. Ari appreciates the dedication of those who succeed and believed in the Mayoni team, especially in their divorce department, which served clients with great financial opportunities. He advised me to take as much time as needed, but I assured him that breaks would only be needed occasionally, as the case seemed clear. Living in a state where there is no fault divorce, we both intended to prioritize the well-being of our daughter, Allison. We each had our own retirement plans, and we could easily split the proceeds from the sale of the house. I was shocked by how smoothly everything was going. When I returned from work in the evening, Tracy cooked my favorite dish, spaghetti supreme, and opened a bottle of delicious Merlot. The evening seemed full of possibilities, and I was too caught up in the moment to mention that Jacques was a wine connoisseur. It's not easy to stay organized when you're on the verge of ending a relationship. At dinner, Tracy kept up her usual lively conversation, pretending that everything was fine between us. After a few minutes, I couldn't hold back any longer and decided to bring up the subject. Reluctantly uttering these terrible words, "We need to talk," I said without hesitation. She replied sharply, "No, you don't need to." I was surprised by her sharp reaction and the harshness of her tone. I recently found out that she has been in a relationship with her boss for many years. Knowing my strong feelings against infidelity, I was completely shocked. How could she think that I would be able to forgive her? Trying to keep my composure, I calmly suggested that we have an adult conversation before taking any legal action. "You can do whatever you want, but I won't agree to a divorce," she replied, her voice clearly annoyed. "The truth is that we love each other, and I don't want to let you go. I will fight for us every step of the way. It's foolish to risk losing the best you've ever had just because your pride is hurt," I tried to reply, but she interrupted me before I could finish. "Before you found out about Jacques and me, did I do anything that would make you doubt my love for you? Have I ever treated you badly? I gave you all the love and care you needed and made sure you were taken care of in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally," Tracy said. "Shouldn't we be each other's most trusted confidants? If you hadn't accidentally found out about this, you would have continued to love me without even suspecting betrayal. Can't we go back to that innocence?" she asked. "No, because the truth has been revealed. Your love for me seems less sincere now that I know you've given yourself to another man, body and soul. You knew it was a betrayal but hid it from me," I said angrily. "I cannot consider 2 decades of deception a real manifestation of love. The fact that you've been in a relationship with another man for 20 years is disturbing, but admitting that you love him is even more heartbreaking. You shared intimacy with him as you did with me, How does this show your love for me? Putting aside the physical aspect, if it's attainable at all. Don't you see that every ounce of love you gave him has been taken away from me? You had enough love for both of us, but it feels like he got it all, I said angrily. He understood everything, but I knew that you wouldn't be able to understand, so I hid it from you. And now you confirm my suspicions, Tracy said. Did he really understand? I couldn't understand because I didn't want to accept that you have another partner. These arguments are absurd. I would never be naive enough to let you make such a choice voluntarily. So you made it yourself, solely for your own benefit. It was about satisfying your desires and needs. And believe me, if I hadn't found out, I would have happily lived my life in ignorance, I said, almost hysterically. An absolute fool, this inscription could be carved on my tombstone without hesitation. Here lies Rick Avondale, a blissful ignoramus who believed in a blameless life, ignoring his wife's double marital obligations. The funeral and viewing took place on a weekday, Monday, but I chose to skip this somber event. Instead, I continued to go about my daily business as usual, going to work. When I got home, I found Tracy and Allison still dressed in morning clothes in the kitchen. I continued with hysteria and sarcasm. My daughter returned home from college just in time for this event. When I tried to hug her, she pulled away, and tears streamed down her face. Tracy, noticing the tension, put her hand on my arm, silently urging me to calm down. I usually respected her boundaries and didn't interfere with her, but this was an unusual situation. Frustration boiled up inside me, barely contained in the form of a low growl. Quickly grabbing the necessary things, I packed my bag and left without delay. As soon as I left, Tracy flooded my phone with calls that I chose to ignore. Allison, to her credit, did not shy away from the truth. She had already made the decision to present me as the enemy in this story and was adamant about making me pay. At that moment, it became obvious that she no longer considers me her father, either by blood or by heart. The realization of this fact hit me like a brick. The next day, I decided to take control of my financial situation. I went to the bank to split our accounts, close our joint credit cards, and open new ones in my name only. I also set up an appointment with the lawyer Ari recommended for Thursday. Despite feeling exhausted from not sleeping for 3 days in a row, the lawyer's name was Mike Sketch, but something didn't inspire me with confidence in his legal abilities despite my fatigue. I did not see the need for further conversations. I explained the situation to him in detail and made it clear that I wanted to get a quick divorce and my share. I also made it clear that I would seek alimony for the maintenance of our daughter from Jacques' inheritance. If she is no longer part of my responsibilities, her biological father should take financial responsibility. I told Mike that I didn't want to be exploited anymore, and he seemed to agree with my decisions despite his warning that Tracy's disagreement with the divorce could lead to mandatory consultations and lengthy legal proceedings. I remained unperturbed and told him to act true to her word. Tracy received the divorce papers at her workplace, the Sofa Hotel, the following Monday. Judging by the time, I assumed that she received them at 10 o'clock in the morning. Just a minute later, our secretary informed me about Tracy's angry call on line 3. All week long, I tried to ignore Tracy's calls and texts, telling the main staff to send them to my voicemail. They diligently followed my instructions, but I soon realized that avoiding her indefinitely was not the best solution. As a result, I instructed Marlene, our senior secretary, to immediately transfer Tracy's calls to me. 15 seconds later, the second bell rang. "Don't you dare switch off," she demanded. I stopped talking again, wondering when she would realize that politeness was necessary if she wanted to talk to me. The third call was not long in coming. When I picked up the phone, she was speaking softly, clearly trying to contain her emotions. "You won this time," she said. I replied with feigned enthusiasm, "Wonderful. Please contact my lawyer, Mike Sketch, to arrange our meeting. It may be useful for you to attend, and this will help speed up the process." Our meeting was scheduled in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I stayed at a nearby motel, visiting my former home to tend the lawn, pick up mail, and pack my things. Tracy saw me driving up to the house and tried to greet me with the enthusiasm of a long-lost husband, hugging me in the driveway. I gently pushed her away and entered the house. You didn't have to expose our problems to the public, she commented. If I'm such a terrible person, why don't you just divorce me? I replied with a touch of sarcasm. Our meeting with the lawyers was scheduled for 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Being the gentleman that I am, I let Tracy first lay out her arguments about her unbreakable love for me. Despite the fact that there was a special place for Jacques in her heart, she believed that now that he was gone, attention should be paid to me. Are you really willing to give up 20 years of marriage for this? She asked. Does our love have such a low value for you? No, precisely because our love meant everything to me. We have to leave this marriage, I replied. You completely took over my heart and deceived me into taking over. How can I not see this as a breach of trust, the very essence of marriage? I asked. You knew perfectly well that your actions were deceptive and wrong. You knowingly violated my trust to satisfy your own desires, both physical and emotional. Although he knew about your actions, he accepted them, leaving me deceived and blinded. This divorce is not the result of my actions, but rather the result of your selfishness and betrayal. I would never accept that you physically share yourself with another man, but sharing your love with someone else is a betrayal on a much deeper level. The pain of this betrayal is much deeper than if you were just having a meaningless affair with another person, I said sadly. You loved him, shared a bed with him, and even had a child with him. The fact that I didn't know about it doesn't justify your actions. You both betrayed my trust. It was lucky that he died of a heart attack that day, because if he hadn't, I would have taken matters into my own hands, I added sarcastically. Tracy gasped as my words reached her. Tears were already streaming down my cheeks. In all this time, you have never apologized for your infidelity. You were only apologizing for the pain you caused me, I whispered angrily. I'm sorry that we ended up in this situation, but I can't help feeling that your apologies are insincere, I said sadly. Rick, I still hope that we can work things out and save our marriage. Please, let's not give up, Tracy begged. Our relationship was supposed to be a partnership, not to separate us. It was supposed to be just us, together, forever, I said. Mike looked at Tracy's lawyer and said, I think our work here is done. Your client must sign the documents and send them to us. Tracy's lawyer, a serious middle-aged African-American woman, firmly stated, extending her hand to Mike to shake. After settling some minor details over the next few weeks, our divorce was formalized. 3 months later, shortly after the divorce was finalized, I instructed Mike to start a lawsuit against Jacques' estate. I probably wouldn't have demanded child support and college fees if Allison hadn't made it clear at the funeral that she no longer wanted to maintain any relationship with me. It is unpleasant to receive such disrespect after I have devoted 18 years to raising this child as my own. But apparently, Allison had 4 years to think about this decision after Tracy informed her about it, and from her point of view, I was just considered a fool after 14 years of sincere paternal care. Everything turned out to be in vain. Therefore, when Mike offered to compensate for the lost respect with the sum of $1 million, I was not offended. I even appreciated Mike's straightforward approach. I was expecting a call from Shelley after she was informed of this. Maybe she thought I'd react better to the news from Tracy, but she was wrong. Was this another form of revenge against me? Tracy asked when I picked up the phone. Greetings, Mrs. Avondale. How nice of you to call, I replied. At the same time, I did not lose sight of the reason for her call. You do realize that this makes you incredibly insensitive, right? She noticed. Do you understand that I've been raising someone else's child for 18 years while you, Shelley, and Jacques were having fun at my expense? I answered her question with a question. And now this kid thinks I'm just dumb, I retorted angrily. I don't care about your opinion, I said, hanging up without bothering to say goodbye. I suspected that Tracy had passed on my firm stance and stubbornness to Shelley. As she eventually gave up and sent me a check for $1 million, interestingly, Shelley soon sold Sofel to a Japanese company for $8 million, proving that she could well afford to part with the $1 million she paid me. It seemed that even without Jacques' involvement, this was a shrewd business move on her part. It would seem that this was the end of the story, but as the famous announcer Paul Harvey often said, that was not all. Just 2 days after the sale of Sofel, $2 million was transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands in my name. This generous sum was my reward for helping Nakatomi Latte purchase Soful within the agreed 9 months, according to the conditions set by Nakatomi's unnamed lawyer and myself. The agreement stipulated that if Nakatomi successfully completed the purchase by a certain date, I would receive a reward for the effort, regardless of the extent of my participation and how the acquisition process would develop. But as soon as the deadline passed, the deal stopped working. You may be interested to know about my role in the Soful deal. To be honest, I wasn't completely transparent about this story. Although most of the events I have described actually happened, I must admit that some details have been exaggerated. I played the role of a man who doesn't understand anything about what is happening, acting out a play that could well have won an Oscar. Let me explain further. It was only a month before Jacques' death that I finally got into the situation. Suddenly, I was contacted by a lawyer from Nakatomi who asked me to help negotiate with Jacques about the purchase of Soful. I asked, genuinely intrigued, "Why do you think I can help other than my wife's connection to Jacques?" The lawyer replied, "We recognize your intelligence and believe in your ability to handle the task of outsmarting the person who has been deceiving you for many years and benefiting from it." I was shocked to the core. The revelation that Tracy had been unfaithful and that this Japanese man knew about it was truly incredible. Nakatomi conducted extensive research on many companies, examining all aspects. They found information about Jacques, Tracy, Shelley, and even their daughters. Knowing that I would be inclined to help them, they wasted no time in presenting me with evidence of Tracy's infidelity. Given that other software development firms were also considering this issue, I had a limited 9-month window to take action. They presented me with a lot of evidence, photographs, videos, phone records, travel receipts, everything needed to expose both of them. Just when I had every chance to bring them down, they made me a tempting offer. Despite the fact that I was already financially secure, they seduced me with a payment of $2 million for helping them wrest control of the company from Jacques. To tell the truth, I was ready to help even without monetary encouragement, but I preferred to keep this feeling to myself. My main focus was on developing a plan to secure my financial future after the divorce, ensuring that I would receive my fair share without any division of property, especially since we live in a state where there is no sense of guilt. It was important for me to keep my composure and not reveal my intentions too early. Although my initial reaction was to resort to cruelty, imagining how I would appear before them at the next meeting and go to extreme measures, I quickly realized the consequences of such a rash decision. The thought of spending my days in prison as a cellmate was not a fate I was willing to accept. I made a conscious decision to stay calm and collected, pretending that I didn't know anything, a tactic I had honed over 20 years. I told Ari about my findings regarding Tracy and Jacques, without revealing the identity of my informant. We stayed at the factory late into the night, enjoying Don Julio tequila and brainstorming solutions to the problem. When we got to the half of the bottle, Ari sincerely remarked, "You should have given him some of that stuff, Rick." It suddenly dawned on me that I should do, but given the circumstances, instead of giving it to her, I thought quietly, I should have slipped some to him. 2 problems are solved in one action. One of the notable advantages of crystal is the absence of contraindications compared to most basic medicines. Only one thing to keep in mind, this medicine should never be taken by men. It is designed to reduce female libido, but it is known that in men, it causes a dangerous increase in blood pressure and a potentially fatal heart attack. My only goal was to somehow slip it to Jacques. Jacques and I are members of the same golf club and often play foursome with 2 other friends. I had planned that the 4 of us would play next Saturday. After finishing the first 9 holes, we decided to make a planned stop at a restaurant to have a leisurely lunch. The first 9 holes went well, and we enjoyed taking a break for lunch and drinks before proceeding to the second round. When we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but use my trading skills and casually remarked to Jacques, "Are you okay, buddy? You look a little worn out." Acknowledging the age difference, my question seemed to make him think. When I suggested that tea time be moved back half an hour so that he would have more time to rest, I saw that he was considering this proposal. "No, I'm just a little tired, but there's no need to change our plans because of me." "I'll be fine," he replied. He didn't really look tired at all, but I decided to take advantage of his concern that he was the oldest in our group. I reached into my pocket and took out a small package of unmarked white pills from my personal stash that helps me get through the day. I handed the package to Jacques, offering him one of the pills inside. "Take one of these over the next few days. If you like them, I can hook you up next time we play golf," I said. Jacques took a pill from the bag, swallowed it, washed it down with a sip of bourbon with ice, and nodded his thanks. Half an hour later, he was pounding his chest like a gorilla and making Tarzan-style screams. "Let's go, guys. I feel pumped up," he said enthusiastically. In fact, he would soon start feeling the effects of the pill. An increase in blood pressure can provide a burst of energy, which is why athletes often psych themselves up before a match. But too much of a good thing can lead to negative consequences. If you're wondering why I gave him a small bag and not a traditional bottle or pill container, then he planned to dispose of the bag after taking all the pills, rather than risk someone finding them in his pockets during the upcoming competition on Wednesday evening. 5 pills should have been enough by the usual meeting time for Jacques and Tracy, when his blood pressure would already be elevated from their passionate encounters and medications. This recipe was a sure way to provoke a heart attack, with a fatal outcome. Jacques decided to consume the entire package of medicine at once, which led to cardiac arrest. Due to the limited resources of the crime investigation department in our small town, an additional investigation of the incident was conducted only if there were suspicions. Knowing this, I tried to play the role of a devoted husband perfectly, behaving the same way as a month ago when I first learned about the betrayal. I must say, it was a convincing performance. I was able to exact revenge. Ari and his wife had no idea about anything, and I played the role of a grateful friend, rejoicing at the success of my insidious plan. I was even surprised at how skillfully I behaved at dinner, hiding my true intentions under a facade of gratitude. When Jacques left the game, I was able to manipulate the situation to my advantage by using Ari as a pawn in my revenge game. The taste of victory was sweet as I watched my plan unfold and realized that I had finally achieved the justice I was striving for. The dynamic of the relationship between Tracy and Shelley has changed markedly, especially after Shelley managed to survive Jacques' death in the presence of Tracy. It was rumored that Shelley was especially angry at Tracy for not convincing me to drop the lawsuit against the estate for unpaid alimony. Not knowing that Tracy would not receive this money because of our divorce, shortly after the company was sold, Tracy was immediately fired from her job in disgrace. I hope no serious company will give her a decent position as her reputation has been tarnished. Rumors about Jacques' inappropriate behavior towards female employees circulated long before his affair became known, so it did not come as a big shock to many in the company. Tracy lost financial stability and the opportunity to start life anew in a new industry. The scandal may have damaged her reputation for a while. As a result, Tracy's story was known to many. Since I took care of it, I did not feel sorry for her or her ungrateful daughter, whom I provided for and raised for 18 years. Now, Allison had no one to pay for college, and she had to get a job as an assistant, which was tough for her. Tracy also works at a fast food restaurant as a cleaner. Allison made it clear that after Jacques' death, she no longer wanted any relationship with me, refusing me not once but several times. I think this is the result of all the years I spent raising her, supporting her, coaching the football team, and attending all her dance concerts. I'm not going to repeat this mistake. Personally, I think I'm doing pretty well considering the fact that I've lost a life partner I lived with for 20 years. It was a difficult process, but eventually, I started dating again. Nevertheless, I doubt that I can fully trust another woman, and I'm not sure that I'll ever find someone who can compare to what I had with Tracy. Despite this, I am free from any obligations, with a fortune of about $5 million. I switched to semi-retirement, and now I take on only special projects for my own pleasure. Perhaps one day, I will invent a pill that will allow forgetful husbands to quickly recognize a cheating wife. This would undoubtedly change society. The Thanksgiving day was approaching. The first snow had fallen outside, just a little bit, but enough for the neighboring kids to be fully engaged in snowball fights. My wife and I were eagerly awaiting the arrival of our children for the holiday. Additionally, some distant relatives returning from Europe were supposed to pass through our town. Pamela came back from the store, having bought all the food she needed for the party, and began to make some preparations. She had found a task for me to rearrange the furniture so that we could all sit around the huge table in the living room. I was already looking forward to the appetizers, which she made just amazing, although she cooked quite rarely, because from time to time she had to go on long business trips. My wife was an archaeologist, often sent on excavations. I missed her during those times, but when she returned, we tried to spend as much time together as possible to make up for the time apart. Yet, as the years passed, we grew more accustomed to this routine. Now, I simply waited for her return, worrying that nothing would happen to her on the road. On the eve of the holiday, after finishing preparing the room, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it and saw that my cousin and her husband had already arrived. I was slightly surprised because we expected them the next day, but I was still glad to see them and hurried to invite them into the house. "Sean, Anna, it's great to see you. It's been a while since you last visited." Pamela also came out to greet them. I took their coats and hung them in the closet, while my wife suggested leaving the suitcases in the hallway and escorted the guests to the room. When I returned, they handed us a few bags they had brought along. "You didn't think we'd come empty-handed, did you?" Sean said. Anna helped him unpack several wrapped boxes on which our names and the names of our children were written in marker. "Where are Cynthia and Lisa? Are they out somewhere?" Anna asked about our daughters. "Oh, it's been quite a while indeed," my wife began. "They're already quite grown-up girls, they went to college. But they're supposed to arrive tomorrow, so you'll see them." Anna always loved spending time with my daughters. She and her husband couldn't have children, so she poured all her love into my girls. That evening, while they were absent, our relatives started telling us about their travels, places they visited, and the new friends they made. The next day, I woke up a bit later than usual, having stayed up late with the guests the night before. Besides, it was my day off, so I wasn't worried about being late anywhere. Sean and Anna were still in the room we'd allocated to them when I went down to the kitchen for some coffee. On my way, I noticed my wife in the living room, sitting there looking somewhat contemplative. "Hey," I approached her and sat down beside her. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, why would you think that?" she replied, turning towards me. "Well, you were sitting there like you were lost in thought. Did the girls call? Are they okay?" "Yeah, they'll be here in a few hours. Don't worry. I guess I was just lost in thought. I'll go prepare something for breakfast. Sean and Anna will wake up soon." I didn't dwell on it further and turned on the TV. Later, I had to go to the airport to pick up the girls, and Anna asked to come with me. She wanted to hug her darlings as soon as possible and see how they had grown. As we stood not far from the terminals, I noticed that Cynthia, who was a year older than Lisa, didn't arrive alone. There was a tall young man of Arab descent by her side, holding her by the shoulders. From her joyful face, I realized he was her new boyfriend, but I never thought she would choose someone of a different nationality as her partner. All three of them approached us, and Cynthia wanted to introduce her guest, but Anna preempted her and immediately rushed to hug them, examining the girls and praising how beautiful they had become. And then, when Anna calmed down a bit, Cynthia finally started the planned introduction. "Dad, Aunt Anna, meet Isaac. We've been together for several months. Dad, you don't mind that I invited him to stay with us, right?" I couldn't give her an immediate definite answer because I considered this holiday to be a family one, and we had never invited strangers to our home before. But if my daughter had serious feelings for him, I had to accept her choice. On the way home, Anna suggested stopping by a cafe to hang out, but the girls replied that they were tired after the flight, plus Pamela was already waiting for us, so we went straight home. Occasionally, I glanced at the uninvited guest through the rearview mirror, observing how he flirted with Cynthia, but sometimes his eyes turned towards the mirror, and for a moment, our gazes met. His intense stare made me a bit uncomfortable, and I immediately looked away. I didn't know why I had this feeling, but it seemed to me that this guy wasn't as simple as he appeared at first glance, and that he needed something more than just dating my daughter. When we arrived, for some reason, Isaac even paused in front of the house, as if scrutinizing it carefully. Anna, acting like a hostess, immediately invited everyone inside, and I started helping with their small luggage. Pamela greeted us in the house, glad to see the daughters, but she seemed confused when she saw another person. A little later, after a brief introduction, she called me aside and shared her impression. "John, don't you think Cynthia should have warned us beforehand that she wouldn't be alone?" "There's something odd about that guy," whispered my wife. "Yeah, it's a bit strange. But it's her choice. It seems serious between them. Look at how she looks at him." "Yeah. Like she's enchanted." "What? Come on. Don't tell me you're starting to believe in all that stuff." I left Pamela in the kitchen and went to the guests, bringing glasses and a bottle of wine. I didn't want to show our family in a foolish light, so I joined their conversation, occasionally asking Isaac subtle questions that might provide me with some answers. The evening of the celebration turned out to be quite pleasant. Pamela cooked delicious turkey and several of her signature dishes. Lisa helped her a bit in the kitchen, while Cynthia didn't leave Isaac's side. By that time, I had already observed him a bit and couldn't understand why my daughter was so attached to him. But I couldn't dictate her heart, especially since I noticed that my wife was somewhat agitated that evening, and I wanted to pay more attention to her. However, whenever I approached her and asked if everything was all right, Pamela always responded, telling me not to overreact and that she was perfectly fine. She just didn't like that guy our daughter brought along. We all went to bed quite late that evening. Closer to midnight, the girls started cleaning up in the kitchen, and Sean and I invited Isaac to sit outside in the gazebo with some beer. He didn't immediately agree, and only when Cynthia herself sent him with us did he accept our invitation. "How did you meet Cynthia?" I asked him again when we were already sitting at a wooden table under a small canopy. "I told you. I came to pick up my sister from college for a while, and they were friends. That's how she introduced us. But I immediately liked Cynthia. Believe me, John, I won't hurt her," Isaac replied with an accent. "I believe you. But you should know that both Cynthia and Lisa are my daughters, and if something happens to them—" "Are you threatening me, John?" Isaac interrupted sharply. "Easy, friends. What kind of quarrel are you trying to start?" Sean intervened. "It's obvious that Isaac is head over heels for Cynthia. I understand you, John, but you have to accept that soon you'll have a son-in-law," he said with a smile, trying to lighten the mood. I listened to both of them, but mentally stuck to my own opinion. I didn't want to spoil the evening and didn't bring up the topic anymore. A little later, Pamela approached us and announced that it was quite late and called me with her. I said I'd be there shortly and chatted a bit more with Sean, while Isaac decided not to stay and went into the house to relax with Cynthia. The next morning, I woke up with a terrible headache. When I got out of bed, it felt as if my brain had dried up and was now dangling inside like a big raisin. First thing, I thought it might be because I mixed wine and beer the night before. Going to the bathroom, I searched for aspirin and took 2 tablets immediately. I stood by the sink for a couple of minutes, gradually feeling better, and when I returned to the bedroom, I noticed that Pamela wasn't there. Glancing at the clock, I wasn't surprised, as it was already 20 minutes to 11. "We really had quite a sit-down," I muttered, sitting back on the bed. For the next few minutes, I lay on the bed until the pills started to take effect, then I went to look for my wife and the other participants from last night. When I went downstairs, I saw Sean and Anna in the living room. Lisa was getting ready to go somewhere, and Cynthia was reading a magazine. When they noticed me, they all turned towards me at once. Did I miss something? I felt like they were puzzled about something. No. But you slept for so long. Do you always crash out like this after a drinking session? Sean replied first. I didn't respond and headed to the kitchen to get more water because my mouth felt very dry. There, I noticed neither Pamela nor Isaac was around. I became curious about where they had gone, especially since my wife hadn't been going to work for the past few days and had been staying at home. When I returned to the room and asked the relatives about it, Cynthia immediately gave me an answer. I haven't seen Mom since morning, and Isaac mentioned he has a friend in this city he wanted to meet. I think they'll both be back soon, my daughter shrugged. Her answers seemed logical to me, so I didn't worry further. Sean and Anna offered me a beer, seeing my condition, but I declined, feeling like the drowsiness hadn't worn off yet, and went back to the bedroom. 2 hours later, I felt significantly better and decided to do something. Even though it was a day off and everything at home was in order, I just wanted to chat with my cousin's husband. During this time, I hoped Pamela would have returned by now. It seemed strange to me that she had been gone for so long without saying anything. After waiting a bit longer, I decided to call her and ask why she did this and when she would return. But her phone didn't answer. I started to worry, but Sean hurried to explain to me that her phone probably died. Agreeing, I decided to wait a little longer, but time passed, and neither my wife nor Isaac returned. Cynthia was starting to worry too and occasionally tried to call her boyfriend. But like my wife, he didn't pick up. Only after another 2 hours did he call Cynthia himself. "Where are you? Why didn't you answer? When will you be back? What? You can't come? But how? Why would you do this?" We could hear my daughter's worried voice from the other room. Then it went silent, and a few minutes later, Cynthia came into the room. Her face looked sad and concerned. "Isaac called," she said. "And what? What did he say to you? You look troubled. Did something happen?" I was worried. "No. Nothing. He said he definitely won't be here today. But how could he do this?" My daughter sat on the couch next to me and sighed sadly. I understood her concern because my wife still hadn't returned, and nobody knew where she had gone. I dialed her number several times again, but the result was the same. I assumed something might have happened to her and started calling her friends, whose numbers I knew. And when they said they didn't know anything, I started calling hospitals and even morgues. Anna and Sean understood my worry and offered their help, but I didn't know what else they could do. I shared the list of hospitals with them, and when, after calling around, we realized Pamela hadn't been admitted anywhere, I was considering involving the police. But Sean suggested they might not take action since it hadn't been much time yet, and I reluctantly agreed. But I couldn't just sit and do nothing. I gathered myself and went to the car, telling the others to call me if Pamela suddenly showed up. I was planning to drive around the city and search for her myself. I knew it might not yield results, but I couldn't just sit idle. Another 2 hours passed as I roamed the city, even refueling. I went everywhere my wife could have gone, but no one in any shop or salon had seen her. Despair started to overwhelm me, and I began to lose hope. When I called Sean, I found out Pamela still hadn't returned. I didn't know what to do. Then I remembered how, on the festive evening, Isaac and Pamela exchanged strange glances. Could there be something between them? It was nonsense, they had just met. But the fact that they both disappeared at the same time was now disturbing me. When I got home, I didn't share my suspicions. The mere thought that she might have gone with Isaac made me furious. But if she did, I couldn't understand why. Couldn't she have decided to cheat and run off with that Arab? In all the years we'd been together, she'd never once given me reason to doubt her, and that made me more convinced that something had happened to her. I called Sean aside, though, and asked if he'd noticed anything suspicious about Isaac. He just shrugged, though he remembered noticing that Isaac had made attempts to be alone with Pamela a couple times, and she was a little nervous when he did so. After his revelation, I didn't know what to think. Maybe Pamela really knew this guy, and they had some kind of relationship, because it wasn't for nothing that she'd been so embarrassed when he'd stepped through the door. I had nothing left but to wait. The day was coming to an end, and there was still no news from my wife or Isaac. I couldn't sleep well at night, as my head was filled with various crazy thoughts. And the next day, if Pamela didn't show up, I decided to go to the police and, if necessary, beg them to take up the search. But in the morning, circumstances slightly changed my plans. When I woke up and was getting ready to leave, my phone rang, showing an unknown number. I wasn't in the mood to chat aimlessly with anyone, but it could be someone who knew something about my wife, so I answered. "Who is this?" I asked immediately. At first, there was heavy breathing on the other end, then a hoarse, rough voice, possibly altered, replied to me. "You have something in your house. Your wife brought it from South America. You must find it and bring it to the specified location." "What? What do you mean? Do you know where my wife is? Where is she? What have you done to her, you bastard?" I was shouting by the end. Sean heard my shouting and came over. "What's happened?" he asked quietly, but I didn't pay attention to him. I was focused on getting information from the caller. "An amulet. An ancient amulet. Find it. You have a day. Otherwise, say goodbye to Pamela forever. I'll call back tomorrow." "Oh, and don't even think about going to the police," the voice said, then the line went dead. "Bastard. Let her go right now." But he couldn't hear me anymore, and I hung up, realizing that my wife was indeed in trouble. I didn't know who it was or what he did with Pamela, but now I had a lead. At least she was alive, and I had a chance to save her. After sharing what I'd learned with Sean, I intended to go to the police. Now I had evidence that she had been kidnapped. But Sean started to stop me, reminding me that the kidnapper had warned not to involve the police. It was evident that it could end very badly for Pamela herself. I stopped, understanding that my relative was right. At that moment, my daughters entered. They were just as worried about their mom as I was. They started asking me questions, saying they heard something. But I didn't tell them all the details so they wouldn't worry too much, just said there was a chance to bring mom back home. When the girls went into another room, Sean suggested helping me find the thing the kidnapper mentioned. But I didn't even know what exactly I should be looking for. Usually, Pamela always told me where she'd been and what she'd been doing. But she never mentioned this so-called amulet to me, let alone brought anything like it home. I wondered if Pamela really hid something so valuable at home. But I had no idea why she would do that. I told Sean I'd handle the search myself. I knew what every item in the house we ever bought looked like and hoped to quickly find what was needed. But after searching through the entire bedroom, kitchen, and basement, I found nothing similar. So, I sat down to calm my thoughts and think about where my wife could have hidden something so valuable. But nothing came to mind. Meanwhile, Anna took on the role of a hostess and started preparing lunch because the rest of the family shouldn't go hungry. But personally, I didn't feel like eating, and Cynthia was again glued to her phone, trying to reach Isaac. I hoped for some kind of help and decided to sneak out of the house. I still intended to go to the police. No matter how clever the criminal was, I believed the police could help me. When I arrived at the station, one of the detectives immediately took charge, listening attentively to my story. I tried not to miss any detail, all the while praying they wouldn't reveal themselves because my wife's life was in danger. A little calmer with the promises from the police, I went home, but the worry didn't go away. And when I got back, Sean kept asking where I'd been and what I'd been doing. It seemed like he was even more concerned about the situation than I was. But I didn't tell him anything and continued the search. I hoped I could find this thing and then have a chance to save my wife and catch that bastard who dared to take this step. Time passed, and I had less than a day left to save my wife. But after searching every corner of the house, I realized my chances were diminishing. I even allowed Sean to join the search but asked him to do it as discreetly as possible so the women wouldn't suspect anything. For safety, I even sent them out for a walk into the movies. Luckily, Anna was thrilled about it. But evening came, and I was still left with nothing. Sean tried to cheer me up as best he could. I went outside to refresh my thoughts, and despite the cold, I tramped around the house for about 20 minutes. And then I had an idea, and I thought it was a good one, even if it meant risking my wife's life. The next day, I stayed by the phone, waiting for the kidnapper's call. Sean seemed to shadow me, not leaving my side. With each passing minute, the tension grew stronger. Then the phone rang, and I immediately picked it up. "Hello," I answered. "Have you found what I told you?" The same unpleasant voice replied. "Yes. I found it." "Release my wife," I replied. And when I said these words, Sean seemed to snap out of his thoughts and stare at me questioningly. "All right. Let's meet exactly in an hour. At the abandoned factory south of the city. Don't be late," said the voice and hung up. I wanted to ask him a few more questions, but it was already impossible. As soon as I hung up and turned around, Sean was already standing in front of me, looking at me intently. "Did you find that thing?" "Seriously? But why didn't you tell me anything about it?" "Show me. I want to see what it is," he almost begged. "No," I replied. "I don't want you involved in this." I patted his shoulder and headed towards the bedroom, where I intended to get the bundle and then call the detective again, following his plan. But as soon as I took a few steps, I heard a distinctive click behind me, and Sean spoke again. "I'm already involved. Hand over that damn amulet. You don't need it." I understood that a gun was aimed at me and that Sean was involved in everything happening. Raising my hands, I slowly turned to him, realizing that at this moment, I had lost another relative. "Sean, is it really you?" "What did you expect?" "Yes. I know about this thing. Isaac promised me a good pay if I helped him find it. I know Pamela took it for herself. But we need it. Isaac is extracting information from Pamela right now. But it seems that this amulet is more valuable to her than her own life." Now I began to understand the whole picture of what was happening. But I never expected this from Sean. Isaac himself seemed suspicious to me from the very beginning, and now I understood why Pamela was not thrilled about his appearance in her house. Apparently, she already knew him. But why didn't she tell me anything right away? Then I could have taken measures, and she wouldn't have been kidnapped. Or maybe there's something else behind all this? While Sean aimed at me and expressed his opinion, I took advantage of the moment when he got distracted by noise in another room and skillfully grabbed the gun from him. I still had those skills from the army, and now he was in the crosshairs. At that moment, Anna entered the kitchen. Seeing that I held her husband at gunpoint, she screamed and started cursing me, shouting that I had gone mad. But I didn't listen to her. Looking into Sean's eyes, I realized that he too was a criminal and that he wasn't just going to let me go. But if I let him go, he would contact Isaac, and then he might kill my wife. I swung my gun and knocked Sean out with a single blow. As he collapsed to the floor, Anna ran up to him, still cursing me. I had to confess that he was involved with a criminal and that Pamela had actually been kidnapped by Isaac. I had hoped she would understand me, but as she grabbed the frying pan off the stove, I realized that Anna wasn't as innocent as I first thought. She swung at me, but I dodged, and I managed to grab her by the hand. When I squeezed her wrist tightly, she dropped the frying pan to the floor. At first, I thought she just wanted to get back at me for her husband, but when I asked her, she replied that she also knew about Isaac and that cursed amulet. Time was running out. I was worried about my wife, so I didn't go easy on my cousin. With one slap on the cheek, I rendered her senseless. And when both relatives were lying on the kitchen floor, I had to think of a way to restrain them, so I looked for a rope. My daughters rushed downstairs because of the noise. I didn't want them to witness all of this, but it was already too late. Lisa just asked if I had gone mad, and Cynthia started questioning me about why I acted this way. So, I briefly told the truth to my daughters. Although I didn't want them to know everything, there was no other way. Luckily, my girls understood me and stood by my side. Although it saddened them to know their mother was in danger, they were willing to do anything just to save her. They helped me tie up Sean and Anna and stayed to watch over them. Meanwhile, I called the detective and informed him that everything was ready. The police and I had arranged the previous day that I would wrap some object in a cloth and arrange a meeting with the kidnapper. This was to lure him out, allowing the police to attack him. Arriving at the meeting place, I arrived a few minutes early. But Isaac was already there. I got out of the car and entered the building, searching for him. But I didn't have to search for long. He was in a spacious hall with many columns. When I entered, he stepped away from the window where he stood before and took a few steps towards me. The amulet. Did you bring it? He said. First, show me Pamela. I want to make sure she's okay. Isaac nodded in a direction, and moments later, another accomplice of his appeared from around the corner, leading a person with a dark bag over their head. I recognized my wife's clothes and noticed dried bloodstains on her. Isaac approached her and removed the bag. Then he pulled out a knife and placed it against her neck. The amulet, he repeated. I extended the bundle forward. There were only a few moments left until the truth would be revealed, and I hoped the detective wouldn't let me down. Tell me why? Why did you do all this? Why did you kidnap her? You were at our home and could have just taken this thing from there. I spoke to Isaac, trying to divert his attention. Oh. It's not as simple as you think. Yes, I knew from the very beginning that this amulet was with you. But I couldn't let your wife get away with it unpunished. You know what she did to obtain it? This damn bitch simply stole it. From my father. He was the first to acquire it. And your bitch decided to seduce him and take the artifact. She stabbed him with a knife while he slept. Just slept. Fortunately, he survived and told me everything. And now I want revenge. But we need the amulet, and your bitch will pay for everything she's done. I dropped my hand after hearing this. I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I understood he was telling the truth. At that moment, I felt disappointed in my wife. Could she really be capable of betrayal, let alone murder, for some trinket? Did our family mean nothing to her? While I pondered this, Isaac repeated to hand over the bundle. And when his accomplice approached me, extending his hand, I noticed a red dot on Isaac's forehead, indicating the police were ready to raid. Release my wife, and I'll give you this thing, I told him. He was so consumed by the desire to get the amulet that he pushed Pamela aside. At that moment, the window shattered into pieces, and Isaac collapsed on the floor with a hole in his forehead. I didn't hesitate and lunged at the other criminal. But it wasn't that simple. Several more people in dark clothing and armed emerged from hiding. But at that moment, the police didn't waste any time and stormed the building. While I struggled with one, the officers dealt with the others. After a few minutes of struggle and gunfire, it was all over. The criminals were apprehended. One bullet narrowly missed my wife, leaving a hole in the concrete column next to her head. Later, the detective approached me and provided additional information about these criminals. They turned out to be members of some cult and were hunting for certain artifacts. But I couldn't care less about them anymore. I was just glad that it was all over. Only one unresolved question remained for me personally. When my wife and I were already sitting in the car, I decided to find out the truth directly from her, and I threatened her so she wouldn't dare to lie to me. Pamela didn't answer immediately. At first, she hesitated, and I understood that she fully realized her guilt. Forgive me. But it wasn't exactly as Isaac said. When I was in South America, I went out for a few drinks with colleagues in a local bar. There I met Isaac's father, as I later found out. The drink turned out to be very strong, and, well, you know how it goes. In short, we ended up in his room. I woke up in the middle of the night. Before that, he, drunk, blabbered about the artifact to me and even showed it. I don't know why he did that. But later I couldn't resist and took it. He wasn't worthy of that thing. I was planning to hand it over to a museum. And you decided even on murder for this? No. Isaac lied about that. When I was leaving, that man woke up and attacked me, and I had to defend myself. I barely survived, and I thought he died. I hoped no one would find out about it. The village where we were seemed like a forgotten place. It hurt to hear her words. But I understood that at that moment, she was telling the truth because now not only her life depended on it. In the morning, after Isaac's call to me, he told her that if I didn't bring the amulet, he'd reach me and our daughters. Can you at least tell me where this cursed amulet is? I asked in the end. But haven't you found it? She asked, surprised. I reached for the bundle and unwrapped it. Inside lay a small clay figurine of an angel that used to adorn the shelf in our bedroom. When I wrapped it in the cloth, I knew it was risky, but it was a chance. And I was glad the police operation went smoothly. Pamela and I went home. Sean and Anna were arrested for their involvement. I didn't want to have any more relations with them. Now, my family's well-being was all that mattered. I worried most about the daughters. As for my wife, after everything, my feelings for her faded. I understood that she made a common mistake when, drunk, she went to bed with someone else. That can happen to anyone. But her other lies and secrets only intensified my pain. The detective recommended that my family and I move, as it might not be over, and other cult members might continue hunting for the artifact. I wondered where it had been all this time. When we arrived home, Pamela reached for the chandelier and pulled out a small pendant. How could I not have thought of that? The artifact was eventually donated to a museum, though I learned from my wife that she wanted to sell it on the black market to pay for her daughter's education, but her plan went awry the moment she saw Isaac on the doorstep. Another one of her lies only encouraged me to file for divorce. The police never found out about the attack on Isaac's father because Isaac himself had been killed, and if anyone else knew, they kept quiet for some reason, but it kept Pamela out of jail. We continued to communicate occasionally, especially since she and I have kids. But I couldn't love her like before.